to welcome you all to the Programming Dance Together Zoom webinar thing. As Ros says, it's very much a learning journey. It's the first one of these that we've done and recorded. I know Ros and Leah and Caroline from PDSW have spent so much time trying to make it as accessible as possible. If anybody else is running anything and would like to know about some of the things that worked and what we learned along the way, do get in touch with us, because we can save you some time maybe on working out what works and what doesn't. I'm really delighted that this is the first in the National Dance Network series, which is called The Time Is Now. When National Dance Network first put out a call for ideas, Ros and I were talking about what we may be able to contribute from the learning from the Surf the Wave programme, about how artists and programmers can collaborate shoulder to shoulder in the programming of dance as we move forward. And never has that been more important than it is now with COVID and beyond COVID. And the other element in working again with Peggy, who's been such a consistent part of the Surf the Wave programme and who's given so much, is the international element that Peggy brings. So it's really fantastic to have Peggy hosting this, and Alida from Rotterdam part of it. I'm going to do thanks now. We're not going to do them at the end. So I just want to also thank Keira, Ian, Emma Jayne, Joan, for contributing to this. And I'm really looking forward to what the conversation will be. And I just want to do a plug for another event that we have on Tuesday next week, which is to mark the end of Pride Month. And it's entitled Kindness and Inclusion 2020. And it's a conversation with Andrew Moffat. And it builds on the conversations he first took out with Penguins, which was a Birmingham rep, Prime Theatre, Cahoots, Northern Ireland piece a couple of years ago. So if you're interested in that, have a look on the website. It's free and open to everybody. And then there's a closed session for teachers. So if you know anybody who teaches who would like to consider kindness and inclusion in schools, the details are there for them. That's a closed session. So with no more ado, I would like to leave you in the very capable hands of Peggy. Over to you, Peggy.
Thank you, Zana. Thank you. Yeah, welcome everybody. It's wonderful to again be able to facilitate this conversation or guide this conversation. Before we continue, for those who haven't met me before, I am Dutch. I'm a dance activist. That means that I'm not a neutral facilitator in space. I'm a woman on a mission. And of course, you feel that, you hear that because of certain questions that I bring forward. I'm Dutch, so my English sometimes is perhaps a little bit wobbly, but for sure it's much more direct perhaps than you think is appropriate. And even in a Dutch context, I am direct. That's not a disclaimer. I'm not going to be nasty with you. But just that you know, I talked with the panel members. You know, we shared this, and they gave me permission to create a rhythm like this a little bit in the interviews, to make sure that sometimes an answer perhaps is a little bit shorter, and sometimes I'm also rephrasing, and that's an act of power. I know that. It's not that in that moment I think that I know better, but it's me being trained as a dance artist, inviting you to shift your weight, to think, or oh yeah. So it's an invitation to change perspective, to taste a different perspective, because I bring in different vocabulary. Because the strange thing is that even in dance, or perhaps even more in dance, the magic of words and how words invite certain movements out or in is not something to be underestimated, I think. Yeah, we have beautiful guests. You all are guests, we all are participants. But after a short introduction, I will interview artists, presenters, and we will reflect upon their practice. I will first interview Ian Morley. where are you in my screen? There, you're next to me in my screen. Programmer, head of artist development in the Civic in Barnsley. And he will share the conversation with Keira Martin, independent dance artist, choreographer, and performer. After that, we will be in dialogue with Jayne Park, dancer and dance maker, and Joan Clevillé. And Joan, I didn't ask you because you were too late, but are you a dancer, a choreographer, an artistic director? How would you identify yourself?
As all of that.
As all of that. Okay, okay. Are you still an independent dance maker, or are you now established and as a result lost your independency?
Good question.
We can come back to that, no?
Yeah.
Okay, okay, cliffhanger. Then the third interview will be with Alida, Dors. She is an artist, a dance artist, a choreographer. Can I call you an activist, Alida, Dors?
Yes, please do. Yes.
And since 2.5 months now, you're directing one of the biggest theaters in the Netherlands, both producing and presenting work.
Yes.
And you are one of the few women. I think you're the only woman in that range. You're the first one coming out of hip hop.
Yeah.
And you're the first person of color in the Netherlands. Let's say that out loud, because the Dutch always thinks that they are very liberated. They're not. They misbehave to the highest degree. So you have a lot of responsibilities, no?
Yes, responsibilities, but I would love to phrase them as challenges, and adventure is
Cool.
the next few years.
Cool. She's alone, but she's not alone, but because I work with her already for some years as her advisor. So that you know that is also the energy between the two of us. All right. Yeah, I'm going to start with a short introduction. And I'm going to connect to questions, to insights that I have been gathering because of the fact that I have the privilege to work next to a lot of different people in Europe. Independent artists, artistic directors, programmers, festival directors. And what is interesting is that these different countries are working in their own different states of lockdown or opening up again. As a result, we're talking a lot about something that we took for granted for so long, and that is the art of assembling. What on earth is the art of coming together? And what is the art of coming together in a theater context? If we try to understand what theater is nowadays next to a building, is it an attitude? Is it a specific invitation? So the art of assembling in a time in which people are sometimes, and more than sometimes, afraid to come close to somebody else. They learn that that is dangerous. So again, months ago, we talked about the audience and we took for granted that that was an anonymous group of people coming together, sitting closely into the dark, dot. That's not going to happen anymore, probably. And I must say, as a dance activist, hooray, cool. Because if we say that theater is supposed to be a public space, and if the next comment is then that it's not, because a lot of people don't feel invited in that space, then even more than before, we could question, what is it that we want to evoke within the context of a theater, a place, an attitude? What kind of communities we are hungry for? Who are we catering to? So that is a huge question right now. And to give you an example, here in the Netherlands, the theaters are open again, but there are just 30 people allowed in. As a result, I was in the theater last Sunday with Alida. We were audience members, and it was the opposite of being anonymous. We said hello to the other audience members, We said goodbye to the other audience members. The encounter amongst us was as important as the encounter that we had with that and the people in front of us. So if we talk about power, because we should talk about power always, when we talk about roles, when we talk about us, when we suggest that there is an us, a we, there was a lot shifted in that encounter. And that felt good. And within a few weeks, more people will be allowed in. But what are we doing with that, what we are learning right now? So that's the first provocation I would like to bring in. What is the art of assembling? What is the art of coming together? And another thing is, a lot of theaters in the Netherlands right now are reflecting upon what it means to root people in a building. Well, choreographers, wow, that's us, because I'm also trained as a dancer. We know how to organize people in space. We know how to do that differently than our policemen and women are doing it right now on the streets. So what is the knowledge that we have as dance artists that we can offer our colleagues who are supposed to open up the buildings again in order to this primal invitation? So what is the art of programming from that moment on, before we start to talk about shows on stage? The moment that doors are opening and that you can enter, and that the invitation is that you become a part of we, that you become a part of a group for a certain moment in time and space. And that, I think, is a very new chapter that we are entering right now. Not new, we talked about it a lot already, but the importance is there even more than ever. Is it something that you recognize? Is that a good first thing to bring into space? All right. Yeah, because another question that pops up in a lot of conversations that I'm having now is, how can dance continue to be a vital part of society? And then live dance. So, I mean, beautiful what happens in the digital world right now, beautiful. But what is a live encounter? What is that? And what is the importance of that? And how important is it to keep striving for that encounter? And what does that mean if, when the world opens up, some people are more afraid to enter a building than others? I said it already in the informal start, when we kind of walked in this room one by one. There are a lot of theaters in Europe that now realize that their main audience are the people who we describe now as highly fragile. 50 up, 60 up, 70 up. And very often they are the people also who bring in the money. They are the supporters very often of companies. And so what does that mean? What does it mean that tickets will be much more expensive? Is that the new privilege? You see something live and the rest will see it streamed? How are we going to talk about audiences? Well, that's another discussion that is happening right now. What is the variety of audiences that are waiting for us again? Yes, let's talk about audiences. For me, in the conversations that I'm having, it's still very helpful to make a distinction between citizens, audiences, and audience members. Citizens, that's us. We even have citizens of nowhere. Let's also underline that. But citizens, that's the people who live in the neighborhood, in the city you're creating in, you're presenting in. Audiences, I'm not talking about target groups. I would love to get rid of the word target groups. We're an industry of imagination. Let's talk about communities. Let's get rid of target groups. Target groups is, let me try to sell my product. No, let's talk about communities. And then, of course, there is always this vital question: to which communities do you belong as an artist or as a programmer? And which communities you don't identify yourself with? And is that a problem? Yeah. Do you know them? Mm-hmm. But they are a target group. Mm-hmm. They are perhaps a community you would like to be connected to. So we have citizens, audiences, and audience members, people who feel that they are a member, that they belong in that place, that is their place. And we talk about that a lot as well right now. Theatre as a white space, theatre as a space of the privileged, the upper middle class, the language that we use, the things that we take for granted. So let's see if we can also talk about that the coming 1 hour and a half. Yeah, what kind of encounters would we like to create within the context of theatre? What kind of encounters would we like to create? Audiences between audiences with audiences, artists with artists, an artist with specific audiences, individual members of one community connecting to individual members of another community, because the encounter that you were looking forward to is an encounter in the new, in the supposed nothing. That's also something to reflect upon. Are you still with me? Because I'm overloading you, but I'm famous for that. Yeah, you're still, because you think, woman, you know, put on your mic and stop me. Yeah, and I have said this before, and especially people who have worked with me have heard that before. What are our definitions of success now and the coming months? What are our definitions of success? What is it that we will strive for? Especially when we start to collaborate, can we talk about that? And what is our calculated risk? We are supposed to take risk as artists, as people who work in the industry of imagination. That's our job. We are paid for that or not paid for it, but we're still striving for it. So what is our calculated risk? And perhaps risk, because if we talk about risk, before you know, it seems that we're talking about possible mistakes. But that's another thing that we're in right now. We're in the new normal. The politicians in the Netherlands use that a lot. We're in the new normal, but nobody has a clue what on earth that is. Well, hopefully most of us feel that they have a certain craftsmanship in relation to stepping into the not normal, stepping into the supposed newness, nothingness, awkwardness, uncomfortableness. But if you do that and you really embrace the responsibility to start moving in that awkwardness, uncomfortableness, newness, you will take risk. You will have to embrace different definition of success. And some people will tell you that you are failing. And that's another thing perhaps to talk about. Let's talk about the queer art of failure. That is perhaps really needed right now in this time and age. So the last thing is resources. We are going to talk about collaborations between programmers and artists, the co-responsibility that you can feel, and let's talk about resources as well. Not just financial resources, but network is a resource. Certain communities that are connected to you, that's a resource. Your age can be a resource. Your color can be a resource. Your sexual preference can be a resource. Your urgency can be a resource. So what in the exchange of values, in the longing to become a we, do we bring into the conversation to make the work less transactional, but still being aware of what the exchange is and what, as a result, the growth can be. So resources. Hallelujah. I think that that's enough for an introduction. Yeah, I'm going to interview now people, but I can imagine that perhaps some thoughts or questions are already popping up. Hopefully you have pen and paper with you. Sounds very old-fashioned, but it still works. If not, you know, leave your space for a moment, grab pen and paper so that you can make notes. Yeah, so it's just, I'm going to go for a 1 minute pause, mini break, so that the people who can't make notes different than in their computer or telephone can leave to find some pen and paper. It's not obliged suddenly, because especially dance people know how to archive differently than via words and writing. But it perhaps also can help you to stay tuned, because Zooming is not a simple activity. Before you know, you're a little bit like this. And perhaps you mainly use it to draw something also cool. We still have half a minute left for the people who are now running to paper and pen. Right. I still see some empty spaces, but probably people still hear me. Okay. Let's move to Ian and Keira. Are you ready? Yes, can you unlock your mics?
Yes.
Hi.
There you are, the first partners in crime that, yeah. So you worked together the last months in the context of the Civic.
Yes.
It seemed that you embraced to a certain degree, or perhaps to the highest degree, a responsibility. You said yes before.
Yes.
So can you share with us what you were doing in this project that Serve the Wave supported?
Yeah, I'll
Sure.
do it briefly. So Keira and myself have been working together since last September. The project really was to give Keira the opportunity to step into my shoes as a programmer, and for me to actually support that development, really. It also supported me massively because it actually gives me another set of eyes, which aren't my eyes, to go and actually see and work and actually experience work which I would potentially experience, but actually experience it in a different way. And then we can have a conversation and a discussion about that work, and then basically to see if we can get an audience to see that work. So that's in a kind of in a nutshell. Keira would see the work, act as a program for me, and then eventually that work would be all programmed in a whole weekend of a performance. It hasn't happened yet. It should be happening in the October, but it might actually end up being moving to the future. But the plan is really to continue this relationship and see where we go and see how we navigate these current circumstances.
All right. Keira, do you want to correct Ian, or to add something to what he said?
Sure, I'll add. It was just a great opportunity for me to learn about, you know, what Ian's job entails, and just gain that insight into the other side of theatre. And it was a great opportunity to go and see work for me, because generally, you know, I have to be really selective about what I pay to go and see. Mm-hmm. So that was like a complete treat. I got to go and see things I, you know, necessarily wouldn't go and see, and Ian would recommend something for me and I would recommend something for him. So what's been really great is we've just built a relationship where we share collective thinking, and the workload, I think that was probably, Ian would agree, the workload for Ian, you know, the amount of stuff he has to see to program a season. So you know, he could give some of that workload to me, and I could go and look at view the dance, and he could go and see something else. So yeah, just a real supportive relationship with a lot of learning. That's what I'd add.
For me, it's interesting that you use learning immediately, and that Ian, you said, you know, supporting Keira and giving her opportunities. I was happy to hear that you also learned something, that she has a different perspective on things than you have. Yeah. Are there more things that you have learned? Because, you know, and this is me provoking a little bit, Ian, but what did you learn, Ian, from Keira?
One of the things that I learned, which was actually an interesting thing for me, is actually at my current role, I've kind of got autonomy of the program, kind of what I choose as my choice. To actually be able to share that, open up and share that was an interesting experience, and one at first I was little bit apprehensive about, but actually now very pleased about, really. I don't know why I was apprehensive, but I was, but now I'm not. So that was something I kind of, I suppose, experienced and learned from this. Also, different people's circumstances, to actually kind of understand where people are coming from and how people can actually go and engage with work. For me, it is my job to go out and see work. For other people, that's not necessarily the case. It's actually often more pleasure than work for people. Sometimes it is pleasure for me, sometimes it's not. But,
I hope so, Ian. If not, you should quit your job if it's not pleasure anymore. No, I mean, you enjoy it, hopefully, no?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, just checking. Okay. So you say, because for me it's interesting that you use the word autonomy, because that pops up a lot in discussions. Can you, especially when you start to be us and you are in dialogue, how do you do that from your autonomy? So now you were in dialogue with an artist and she gave her an additional pair of eyes. She gave you an additional pair of eyes. Are you now hungry for more additional pair of eyes?
I think for me, a key part of this project really as well was getting a voice. Like Keira is from Barnsley originally, but I'm not from Barnsley. I've worked in Barnsley for 15 years. So it's about getting a voice of an artist that has kind of been brought up and trained and lived in Barnsley to actually be representing Barnsley and actually talking to the people of Barnsley. Because there is, as I can imagine with many venues, a kind of it's often hard to get people through the doors to actually experience art and kind of experience kind of dance, and people may think it's not for them, but actually seeing somebody from their community engaged with it and passionate about it, it actually may change people's minds, really. Get people.
Okay, so Ian, let me give you another provocation. I'm going to go to you, Keira.
Okay.
Was she from the beginning the representation of a certain community for you? Because I know that sometimes is the frustration of an artist, that they are invited because they seem to represent a working class community, a community of color, a community with a certain cultural background. Was that part of the invitation, that via her you wanted to engage with that specific community?
Yes, I would say so. There is part of that, but my background is very similar to Keira's, even though I'm not from Barnsley. I am from a working class background in the northeast of England, so I kind of identify very much with our kind of, I suppose, our citizens. I identify with them very much, but they don't necessarily know that is my background. That's what I'm trying to say, and that's what I'm trying to actually give them that experience for.
So it's also creating perhaps a different level of intimacy, so that an encounter can be invited in as a result of that.
Oh yeah, definitely. It actually made me think when you were talking earlier. I wrote a note. I've lost it.
Focus, Ian.
I'll come back.
Find it. Then
Yes, it was the desire to be intimate together. But which is kind of what I thought about what is the theatrical experience? What you going into that auditorium with 30 people and that experience being as important as what was on stage.
Yeah.
You were together, but you were also having that intimate experience with the artist.
Yeah.
That's kind of massively important for me, really.
Keira, how was it for you to work in this collaboration with Ian and to connect differently to your fellow artists, to the community around the theatre?
Sure. Like Ian said, we share a similar background, and we share a lot of politics, and we come from a similar place. So I'm happy to be that voice of the working class people in Barnsley. I'm quite happy to take that. I suppose the learning, again, it's more the collaborative shared experience. So like I share, Ian and I share similar stories. So I would say, let me articulate, it's about shared stories, shared experiences. So if artist and programmer can do that, then when they're looking at work to program, surely, that's what might come up in the program: more narrative, more storytelling, different ways of telling stories. And therefore you're reaching out to a wider audience, because for me, I do what I do because I like to connect and share experiences with others. And yeah, if that made sense.
Yeah, so Keira, could this become part of your practice, that you create certain collaborations with not just Ian, but more programmers in the UK?
Yeah,
Would that be part of your,
definitely.
yeah? And
Yeah,
why
it's
would that-
definitely something. Yeah, I mean, I definitely love curating, bringing people together, different communities, different artists, and working with venues and programmers in this way. So I've been doing it also in Cornwall, down at Amata with Tamsin. That was also funded by Surf the Wave. So I've had 2 opportunities to work with programmers in a different way, you know. So with Cornwall, it was more about outreach and reaching those communities that are deprived. And with Ian, it's more being shared, collaborative. So I think this is the way to go. For me, I'd love to build on these relationships and gain more with other theatres and programmers.
But how do you deal with the fact that in the end, very often the programmer has more power than the artist? So that, because now you suggest that there was an equal exchange, but I'm not sure, Ian, but do you have a proper job?
I do have a proper job, yes.
You have a proper job. And Keira, you're an independent artist, which means freelance.
Yeah.
So, and you know, Ian can say no to you, but can you say no to Ian if he wants to program you?
I feel like I can, because I feel like we have a good, honest relationship. I feel like with Ian, I've built, I mean, you can interrupt me, Ian. I can be extremely honest. It's transparent. I feel there's a respect there. We both value each other for what we bring. We probably, I mean, I feel that we agreed that we're both as important. Yes, the systems in which we work under put that on us, but as human beings and the way we want to operate and our ethics and what we do it for, I think are shared.
Can I add to that? Within the context of this program, the weekend that is going to be curated, it is fully Keira's kind of I suppose artistic voice within that. So I would question things if I kind of if I thought, oh, what's that in there for? Why do you want to present that piece of work, or kind of why this one instead of this one? I think the only thing that I probably said, which in hindsight maybe I shouldn't have, is kind of I wanted Keira's work to be presented in that as well. So that was kind of one of my caveats within that weekend. Your work has to be there as well. So but other than that, the choice of the program is hers really, and kind of and also there's your budget. You can't really go above that. That's what I'd be doing in reality. That's my budget. I can't go above it.
Okay.
That's what you got.
Hey, how transparent are you going to be about your collaboration in this weekend when you have your Minna Festival going on? Because transparency is another word that is really important nowadays. No, can we share how we came to certain decisions? Or
yeah, I would like to be as transparent as possible, because really I think once people know how the weekend came together, that's probably more interesting than some of the rest of the program, or kind of it's more of a, I don't know, a new way in to actually engage with the audience.
Okay, so what does that mean, this transparency? Are you going to let yourself be interviewed? Will there be artists and presenters that will listen to you sharing your conversation? How are you going to do that?
It could be anything. We haven't decided yet. So I'm opening for suggestions. I hope Keira is as well.
Yeah, I mean, I always like to provoke a debate or a conversation. You know, that's what I like to do. So I'm open to that. Yeah, I'm used to giving interviews, talking openly why decisions are made.
So are there any, and let's not use the chat function yet. I do see that there are 2 people. There is a question already. I would love to know if it was equal monetarily. Monetarily. Yeah.
Okay. Can I ask in terms of what exactly? As in
that is Ella Mesma. Ella, you can talk, huh? I mean, later on we will just use the chat function, but you can talk right now.
Hi, I've totally got food in my mouth.
Hi, Ella.
Hi, Keira. Hi, Ian.
Hi.
Yeah, I was just thinking about that, like in terms of these, because it seems really beautiful that you're really working in this equal way, from this place of equal. But as an artist, often I feel that the balance of power and money are very interlinked, and it would just be nice to hear a bit about that, about like how, whether there was a power dynamic around the money that was involved in this project. I mean, I asked this question just before Ian said about having a budget.
Yeah.
So you've kind of started to answer it.
Cool.
I'm going to finish.
Perhaps you want to add some things, Keira and Ian. And let's connect it to this provocation that I gave you earlier, to resources. So this is a question in relation to the financial resource, but perhaps, you can connect other resources to it as well. What was exchanged, and what was it that was given to you in the end?
Okay, cool. So in terms of financial resources, we were very lucky to get the kind of grant from Surf the Wave. We worked out a budget for Keira's time, so she was getting paid kind of as a kind of, I suppose, a day rate as what I would be getting as a programmer. So kind of her time that she's spending on the project would be the same as my kind of wage, if you know what I mean. So there was a balance within that. I think the biggest challenge that I find when I curate these weekends is I don't necessarily have enough money to really do them justice. Keira was given the same as me, the same budget. So it's kind of, the challenge is how do we make that work with the artists and support them artists to get their G4As if necessary and all that sort of stuff, to ensure that they are comfortable presenting their work during that weekend and kind of supporting as much as possible.
So what about you, Keira? What would you love to add?
I'd add that we did the budget together because it was an application process. So I had ownership over that as well. Budget is always an issue, as we know, but I never felt that it was Ian's thing and not mine, and I was there to make the decisions. The learning in that, I'm probably going back a little bit, just with budgets, is as an artist, I was having to have conversations about budgets with other artists, openly. I'm like, hey, this is not great. I really don't want to be saying this, but this is what we've got. And that was a massive learning curve for me to have to, pass that news on and work with them small budgets. But in terms of what I got, Ella, I got paid for the jobs that I did, like a
Brilliant.
should. So it felt very equal.
Cool.
Yeah.
Cool.
Thank you.
Thanks, Ella, for bringing that up. Ian and Keira, we will continue talking later on, but I would love to move on to the next couple, Emma and Joan.
Will we mute ourselves?
Sorry?
Did we mute ourselves?
Yes, I think so, Ian. Yeah. So Emma and Joan, you can unmute yourselves. You work together in the context of Scottish dance theatre. True, huh?
Yeah.
And let's give the word to the woman first, Emma. Can you explain to us what you did? Because you were embedded, if I understood it well, in the company for quite a while.
That was the hope. So it's worth saying that was interrupted by the situation that we find ourselves in, which I'll talk to you a little more in a second. But for a really honest background to it, it was myself and another artist, Rob Heaslip, who worked together, and it all came about because we applied for Joan's job.
Sorry, I love that.
Yeah, I want to be really honest, because I think it's important to know that we didn't apply because we felt qualified in any way, but we applied as a real active statement that we maybe want to be qualified, but through choosing to train and live in Scotland, and not having the status of being a rep dancer or the status of someone who navigates the commission circuit, which is a whole other conversation, we will never be perceived to be qualified to do Joan's job. And I say that confidently, that we would never be considered. So we put that application in and basically made that statement in the application so it could be seen by people with the power to shift that. We used that to initiate a conversation between Joan and Liam Sinclair, who Rob and I both value loads. And I think that leans to why we felt we could do that in the first place, is that we knew it would be received with kindness and with honesty. And so we initiated that conversation, and then the funding came around where we're like, we can use this to maybe do this. And the plan was that we would be embedded over a sustained period and really use that time to witness what happens, so we could then best understand what questions to ask, where to position ourselves, and how we could also maybe disrupt and bring something to that environment. But because of the schedule of Scottish Dance Theatre, and because as freelancers, Rob and I have tried really hard to do that thing where you're planning years and years ahead, because we've been told that's what you're meant to do, and that will suddenly make everything easier. It was really hard to get our schedules together and make that happen. So the project had to be delayed because we wanted it to happen in a meaningful way. And so we started in January and spent a glorious week before the building had kind of opened after Panto season. So it was this lovely time where you could, and I've worked at the Rep a lot, but I still get lost, partly because the building is, I would say, funny to navigate anyway, but also because it's never been a home. So we had this kind of empty building and time with the dancers and time with Joan and Liam, where we could just run about and be like, I'm in a corridor and can't get through that door. What am I going to do? Without feeling so silly. And so we witnessed a lot. And then from there, monthly, we would return in small doses to connect with various things. And then March kind of happened, and we had to pause. I don't know if you want to mention anything, Joan, about any other part of that.
No, I think that's a great summary. Yeah.
Yeah, because what was your reason to say yes to this collaboration?
I suppose that I know Rob and Emma. I've been based in Scotland for 10 years. First I was a dancer with the company, and then I started freelancing and created my own independent company. And so I know them as my colleagues from the independent scene, and I still see them as my peers. So I suppose there was that already basis of, there was trust and an interest in them and their practice and their thinking. And then I suppose very selfishly, when I work with the dancers, we work in a building. We're very lucky. We can have guests coming and working with the company. But for me, it's really easy to feel isolated, or to feel like we live in a small city. So for me, any sort of input, like two artists just coming and spending time with us, why would I say no? Very essentially, I just want to get everything that we can.
What for me is interesting is that you both use the word trust, and that's a word that pops up a lot, and it's of course used and abused also a lot in our art form. But also Ian and Keira, you talked about the fact that you recognize things into each other, that you had a kind of shared background. So in terms of collaborations between programmers and artists, it seems that it's helpful when you feel that there is a certain common ground already, that on one way or another you feel connected as fellow human beings, as colleagues. So that brings back the question, how curious are we towards the people surrounding us? Because if we want, to have unexpected collaborations, that means that we have to build unexpected relationships before we collaborate. That's something I think to underline again. So before you can collaborate, you need a certain level of recognition and trust. And how do you build that in times which everything needs to be focused again? So how can we develop a kind of messy practice of interaction, especially in these times, where we don't have a lot of informal spaces anymore to mingle? So it's obvious that this is not over yet. I hope that you will continue the moment that the building reopens. Will you?
Yeah.
Okay.
Actually, we're already talking about continuing in this way, because it's also interesting what that relationship can be just now while working. Can you share one thing with us that you are exploring right now, the two of us, with us, the rest of your colleagues? A question that you're elaborating upon, or? I think we haven't resumed since we were interrupted in March. I think yesterday was the first time that we had a proper conversation. We did a kind of like quick, are you okay? Yeah, I'm okay. Are you okay? Yeah, okay. And then we've seen each other for like 1 minute across the screen, but it was yesterday, and thanks to this conversation that we came really reconnected.
Okay, so the
question, sorry, I was going to say, I think the question is, how do we do this? Because we both, in the conversation we had yesterday, we recognised that there was almost like a huge missed opportunity for us to be in those conversations that have happened through this unprecedented, let's just say it, because that's the word that is used so often, but really is like this strange situation, and it would have been so powerful and useful and also like emotionally helpful, I think, for Rob and myself. However, due to the efforts we have made in our careers to do certain things, what happens is when COVID-19 hit, the most meaningful things that were not product driven instantly had to fall away. So it wasn't an absence of Joan and Liam wanting us to be there, and I feel like if we'd have asked, we really could. But I literally had to disappear and take all of the 7 other projects that I'm spinning plates on and just run round in a circle trying to keep those plates
clear.
And I think it's been really interesting to me that this whole situation has amplified how impossible it is to have that meaningful time anyway. So the meaningful time to meet and build that trust was all predicated on Joan, Rob and myself turning up unpaid to events for 10 years. Let's be honest, the relationship of trust is us rocking up as freelancers and not being paid to be there, and Liam being paid in every capacity I'd ever met him, but also being remarkably generous and open and eager to wiggle ways throughout the 10 years I've known him to maybe just get the train together, because you're both going to Glasgow and have your meeting on the train, or do all of these things that try to create that. So I wonder how we can take the fact we've not had that connection or used the opportunity to really ask how the way we're working means that we miss opportunity. I suppose a structure that leaves you unable to grasp opportunities fully is a pretty shoddy structure. And I think we're at the stage of asking, how do we build a frame together? Seemed to be what we were talking about yesterday, Joan. I don't want to talk for you.
No.
It seems that you're saying a few things that are shared in other conversations a lot that I'm part of right now. One is how we can change this feeling that we lack time all the time. How can we learn to dream in the closer future and not in the far future? So what is dreaming related to the tomorrow instead of next season or within 5 years, if hopefully finally be successful, whatever that means, or when the money is in, whatever that means. So that's a conversation that I'm having a lot now, both with programmers, presenters, curators, and artists. What is the art of dreaming in times in which the future is more than ever unclear? And instead of projecting it to a desired future, how can we continue dreaming into tomorrow? And what does that mean? And how can we fight the feeling that we are on hold, or that we are mainly trying to fix things that were broken and are broken? Is that something that you're also referring to, Emma, that perhaps now is the next chapter for you, how to start connecting in this here and now, whatever that means?
Yes, and I think more of a how do we recognise that time is an absolute privilege, and the structures we've built eat into that. So some people do have finite time, and how do we create a way that changes how that time is experienced, or actually just shifts workload onto people who are more skilled to do that thing. To be honest, I think for me there's a question of waste and wasted time, because you have a lot of people who are doing things that aren't necessarily their field of work, or
do you suggest that it's also interesting that if we think of established companies and the support that they are having, that more independent artists come in to share workload, or to, is that what you're referring to as well?
Yeah, I wonder how we readdress that workload, and also see independent artists as a resource, which was what was lovely. I genuinely felt, and this could just be because I like to disrupt things anyway, and I'm not scared to be like, excuse me, I have a question about that. It really felt like in those management meetings or those wider meetings with the team that if we had really felt something in our gut that didn't quite line up, that we could have gone, hiya, but I'd love to hear more of that. And I think that then levels things a little bit, because it places us in a situation where we're not there to witness Scottish dance theatre, and aren't we lucky to be in Scottish dance theatre? Scottish dance theatre getting some bang hot consultation from a perspective that wouldn't have been in the room. That isn't me saying I'm a bang hot consultant. I'd know some. I can point you towards them. I just asked a really awkward question.
Yeah, clear. Hey, there is a question in relation to your career, Juan, but I'm curious to learn if there are more questions related to the specificness of the collaboration that the two of you are engaging yourself in right now. So are there any colleagues, any people here participating who want to bring in a question that is specifically related to the relation, the collaboration, the co-responsibility that you try to develop? Anybody? Bring in your voice or bring in your typed words, and if nothing pops up, that's also totally cool, because then probably it will pop up within a few minutes and then you can ask it later on. All right, beyond the delayed activity, do you have plans to channel this experience into future work? Both of you. Question for both of you.
I think it's a brilliant question. We asked ourselves that question at the beginning of the program. What's the continuity? And so I think there is definitely a desire to give it continuity. I think both Rob and Emma were clear around, you know, there's something about sustaining a relationship that I think it's really important, and at the same time balancing that also with the fact that we also want to feel like that there is equal opportunities, and that also, you know, that maybe this is a pilot for something that is wider, that is more open, that can include or will include other people. And so yes, I'm definitely interested in continuing, I mean, in both things really, in how do we continue a relationship with Emma and Rob, but also how we make that more of something more embedded in just the way Scottish Dance Theatre is and operates. And then with that comes the question of, resources. It's brilliant that you brought up resources before, and how do we resource that with appropriate support.
Hey, Emma, what about you?
I think I would echo what Joan said about, I'm really interested in it becoming a pilot or a model that can be looked towards, as opposed to just Rob and I carving out a route for us to get in the door. And I think that's why I'm so honest about how the whole thing happened, because it was just like banging loudly. And for me, I suppose there's a bigger question about witnessing great leadership. That's the important experience for me. I trust Joan and I trust Liam as leaders, and they lead in a generous way. And
but let me stop you. It seems that you're also address, how can I develop myself further as a leader, because you already are one, because if not, you were not doing this. You know, what is the shared responsibility that we have, everybody in this room, in order to create cultural leaders, new cultural leaders, future cultural leaders, a bigger variety of cultural leaders. So that is perhaps the practice that the two of you are now trying to develop, so that you can give it to other established companies. I mean, this woman, Olislaegers, is very happy because I'm working with very established companies like Dutch National Ballet next to independent makers. And for sure, connections should be made. So thanks. Let's continue later on. Alida, Dors, I'm going to you now. Are you ready?
Yes, I'm ready and able.
Okay. So can you tell your colleagues from the UK how within your practice right now, programming, creating work, communities, citizens, how all these words connect? And you have 2 minutes, go for it.
Oh my Lord. Okay. Well, yeah, we thought of a programming way to connect all these teams or all these words and the containers words together. So in this thinking of how to program with all these restrictions during COVID-19, we came up with a plan which enables us to move away from the norm, to move away from what is expected. So we could have a moment of rethinking who we are reaching, which communities we are reaching, why we are reaching them, and what do we actually want now. To step out of this machinery of how we usually do it. So that we have a programming. Also, the question we gave to the artists and said, well, this COVID-19 situation, and it gives you the moment to address this building in a different way with your craftsmanship, instead of making a performance for the big avenue or the small avenue. Maybe you can relate in a different way to the building, to make a parcours, for instance, which is a new way of, not especially a new way, but a challenging way of making your art form in a route along our buildings.
Alida, let me stop you for a moment, because everybody is looking at you right now in the Netherlands, because you're a hip hop artist. And you were seen as mid-career, you had your own company, and suddenly you're directing one of the biggest theaters in the Netherlands. Yeah. And, you know, people, some people say, oh my Lord, now you're part of the establishment. Some people say, okay, so you're going to burn the building down. I'm your girl, beat me up. How are you dealing with this expectation that you will make the difference because you are an artist and now you are an artistic director, and that you will find a solution creating the us also in terms of the whiteness of theater, the fact that even in Rotterdam just part of the citizens come into the building. How are you dealing with that huge responsibility that you didn't ask for?
Wow, Peggy. Maybe not think too much about what the rest of the world expects me to do and to be like, but to bring in my embodied knowledge, the way of how I perceive the world, and the perspective that I always brought to my work. I find it very important that we as a theater are responsible to make a connection with the city that we belong to or that we work for. So that is being in dialogue with the city and finding the topics that we both could address and make work for us. What else can I say, Peggy? It's just doing the works and being in dialogue with the organization and being in dialogue with your artists and finding that direction.
Hey, Alida, you say being in dialogue with your artists, but you're still one of the artists. How do you deal with that? Because are they your artists? Are they your colleagues? You are now suddenly also their boss, because, you know, Theater Rotterdam has a variety of artists that they produce. How do you deal with that so that you are their peer, like you referred to Joan, but you're also their boss right now? You even meant to make a difference. How do you deal with that?
I think at times you be their equals and we discuss the topics that we are wanting to work with in our work and how we get to our work. And at other moments you have to be the one who has this artistic vision and you make the decisions. But it's I think my form of leadership is always being in conversation with each other, finding or propelling some kind of curiosity to each other's works, and working towards dialogue, always being in dialogue with each other.
Can you elaborate a little bit on curiosity towards each other's work? What does that mean now in the context of your practice as this artistic director of this theatre with a variety of artists connected to that theatre?
Well, we have a lot. We have I don't know how you say it. We have different voices, different art forms, or way of expressing yourselves. And I think it's important for me to make sure that we don't become one big blur of voices, but that there's room enough for everybody's craftsmanship next to each other, so we can cater or maybe be in dialogue also more with the city, because we all address different communities, or we bring together different communities in the encounters that we facilitate.
And you asked also the artists to invest into each other's work by being an audience member, no? By studying each other's work.
Yes, we did. When I started, it was we called those things, those moments, the homework sessions, in which we gave each other links to our works, and we had conversation about resources, about your processes, how do you work, what is the samenstelling, your team look, what does your team look like, but also who do you reach and why do you reach them? Why do you think you reach certain communities, and why don't you reach different communities? And what is your big dream for your work to be seen by whom?
Hey Alida, do you meet gatekeepers in your work now? You work there now two months and a half. You're definitely bringing a different work culture, a different, the each one teach one culture of hip hop. Do you encounter gatekeepers who tell you that it doesn't work like this, or don't tell you, but make sure that you start to understand that?
Often, but I don't try to pay too much attention to those people. And even in my words, those people, if it's in my building, I would try to avoid that word, those, because it's us, and we have to constantly work together to find a new discourse or new attitude or a new culture to embrace a more broader perspective of what is, for instance, quality. Quality is one of the first discussions that you always have. If it's for a broader audience, then the discussion is about, but yeah, well, will we lose quality? Or this is how we always do it. Working processes between technique, the technicians that we have. You have the technicians who work within the building, or who go on tour with the artists. So if you want to address a different attitude of working, yeah, then you have gatekeepers all the time.
But your solution is dialogue. The moment that you say these people, being aware that they are your people right now, and that you need to make a stand, but also you need to listen. Is that what you say?
Yeah, well, dialogue is for me a durational thing. It's not one time in conversation. It's something that you have to build on. It's about trust. It's about finding the same language. It's about appreciating the knowledge of the other and trying to build upon each other's knowledge. So a safe space, and knowing that nobody's stepping out of the dialogue. A conversation is maybe one time, but a dialogue is something for a longer period in which we can all, the goal is to grow. So.
Thanks. Let's open up the conversation. So questions for Alida, but also the other people that were interviewed and presented their work. Because some people perhaps immediately have a question, but I would suggest that we have a 2-minute silence again, so that you can reconnect to your own thoughts and feelings for a moment. You can go back to your notes for a moment. So let's say 2-minute silence from now on, and then hopefully there will be questions in the chat, and we will see if we can collect questions to take home, perhaps some beginnings of answers that you can take home. But collecting questions is an important part of our practice, I would say. So from now on, a 2-minute silence. You can move for a moment, and then we're back with questions. Okay, and if you have a question or also an insight, you can put it on the chat. And perhaps good for you to know that everything that is shared on Twat will, we will make sure that we still have it afterwards. And that was a timer. So a lot of questions pop up already. All right, you're reading with me, hopefully. Yeah, can you all read the questions? Is there one question that, for instance, Keira or Emma, you would like to respond to? Is there one question that another participants right now immediately would like to bring in or respond to?
There was something about diverse stories being shared, a question, I think, if that's correct.
We are referring to internal intersectionalities. Is that what you're referring to?
I think so. Is it Jayne that put a question? It just triggered a thought of mine. So if I just share my experience, I'm a traditional dance artist. I access dance through home and culture and Irish heritage. And that question just provokes this thought about, like, I really would like us to acknowledge the snobbery that is around cultural dance generally, and how we access it. So coming with that, and to answer that question, as an artist, I take that, any opportunity I get, I take massive responsibility to make sure that I share that with other voices, you know, from different cultural backgrounds and identities. And I think artists that do get them opportunities of my generation do have that responsibility to make sure that when we do get that opportunity, you know, we are all inclusive and those stories are being told. But from my personal experience, being a traditional dance artist primarily, I have often felt like an imposter. I've often felt like I don't belong. And it's taken me a long time, like Emma said, just hard slog of 25 years to feel like that I can be some kind of voice for traditional storytelling and traditional artists. So I hope that answered your question, Jayne, but I don't know if it did directly, but that's just what it provoked, Peggy. So thank you.
Jayne, do you want to respond to that?
Hi everyone.
Hiya.
It's just more of and personal experience, because I practice Kathak and contemporary dance, but I'm not from the South Asian community. So within that, nobody, no venues, no producers seem to know what to do with my career. And I've been doing that my whole life, trying to find a platform, a space, having to produce my own work, project manage my own work. And, you know, I'm only one person, and I've been told, you know, you should maybe spread those work to people who does best, like what Emma said. But the thing is, nobody knows what to do with me. So how am I supposed to have a career in dance, which I'm passionate about?
I'm happy to respond to that, and all I can do is share my experience, but nobody's ever known what to do with me, ever. So I tell them what to do with me, you know. I go, this is what I'm about, this is me, this is what I'd like. And if the door opens, it opens and I walk through it, and if it doesn't, I just move on and find another. There's no easy fix. I just think, you know, maybe it's not about expecting the sector to know what to do with you. It's about figuring out what you're about as an artist and where you fit and where you belong and how you can navigate that. I don't know if that's useful.
Great. Can I add something to that? Because it seems that we're talking about responsibility again, our ability to be responsive, because I love that about this English word, our ability to be responsive. To what degree, as a dance community, as the community of theatre professionals, can we break fundamentalism within our own community? So in which sometimes one aesthetic is seen as superior above the other, or one type of dancing is seen as more appropriate in theatre spaces as others? And to what degree are we ambassadors, not just for ourselves, but for other aesthetics, other people next to us? So if we talk about collaborations, and we talked about, you know, a programmer and an artist, somebody in the context of an established company and an independent, but now we talk about collaboration, perhaps in the wider sense. What is it we feel an ambassador for? Is that a provocation that I can bring in? Emma, you want to respond?
Yeah, it was just to add to that. I think there's a real thing about power and choosing power, and I think there's an ask that when you don't feel like you, because I can echo, Keira and I know each other, we've spent time together, I can echo those feelings, and we've chatted about that a lot, that you can reach out to your peer group. And so we don't have to envision always reaching out upwards, but it's really easy as a peer group to just shout about each other and make those spaces for each other, and actually to pass the mic. So it's about going to your peer group, and you shouldn't have to go. If you're someone who's invited to this situation a lot, it's about someone like myself actively going, not this time. I think you should speak to this person, because their identity is perceived as complex, when all it needs is us to slow down. And it ties to what Alida was saying, is that slow down and have a dialogue so we can see people. Because often I think the problem is that people don't make time to see anything that is perceived as complicated, when it clearly isn't complicated, because you're living it. Like, you exist, you're not, so to you it's really normal. And I wonder how we as a peer group pass the mic to each other and start to just take control of that and almost make those doors open for each other. If that makes any sense. It's clear in my head, but maybe not in my mouth.
Some people want to respond to that. Alida?
Well, I started my company 10 years ago, and I think I realized that I didn't have an audience specific for what I was wanting to make. So I would like to address that maybe finding your strength in your own autonomy and making your own company gives you the ability to develop your work a little bit more by yourself and in your own environment, and also appreciate the audience that is curious to see what you bring, because they will also might shift their perspective on what they like, and you can bring something to the table which is new to them and make them your audience as well.
There are more questions in the chat. Can you have a look at it? Because of course I can choose, but hey, that's perhaps totally old-fashioned that I choose. So perhaps there's somebody else who wants to pick a question or a provocation that was shared. Emma, you want to go, but perhaps I wait a little bit longer. I can't see everybody, but I'm just going to check, because especially in these times, people who have second thoughts very often are not seen because of this, you know, medium. So Emma is volunteering, but are there any other people who would like to step forward? 5, 6, 7, 8. No, Emma, it's yours. Go.
I think it's just because there was a specific question, Peggy.
Yeah, go.
To me about what attracted me to Joan's work that motivated me to support his portfolio further. And I think there's a number of things, but that it's actually Joan's practice that motivated me.
Oh, sexy answer.
Further.
Because now you make a difference between work and practice, and we even didn't talk about his personality yet.
And I think it's so for me, there's first and foremost, it's the relationship between Joan and the dancers that work with him. And I know some of them very well, and the fact their bodies don't change when he comes over tells me a lot about his practice. And the language around his practice is a language of curiosity and not ownership and not self-promotion. And I would say there's like an embodied politic in there, and I can't quite articulate it, but there's something about you loving dance and not loving power that makes me, well, I'm talking about you, Joan, it feels very funny. And then the last thing is that I think your work's actually live. And you know that Plan B for Utopia, I think I've seen it 7 times. It toured a lot. That's not just because I chased it. Sometimes it was just available. And I could watch it because it is actually a live piece. It's not repetition. It changes and shifts and molds and grows. And I feel like at the core of it, if I didn't enjoy Joan's work, I think I could have that conversation with him.
Yeah, so you're talking about values and principles here, and not about the aesthetics of his work, which I think is more and more how we love to connect, no? Via that, what we, again, want to be co-responsible for. Hey, you had a question, Joan. In a moment of crisis, how do we negotiate personal and organizational fragility with a desire for radical change? I would love to talk about that, because like I said, I work for the establishment next to people who are still underlined as underground, whatever that may be, and everybody in between who are labeled from mid-career to no career to... but hey, that's our field. How can we do that? Desire for radical change, especially now. Any thoughts about that? Tanya, was that a waving hand, or was that just you going into self-expression? Okay.
I have a thought. I suppose kind of obviously with the current situation that we are in with COVID, everything's going to have to change to some extent in the coming future, and we maybe should take this as an opportunity to, if we can, look at our practice and see how we can change it to actually, I don't know, just change the way we are actually really taking risks and actually engaging and talking about valuable, vital things in our society. Obviously, we're going to have potential kind of financial implications for as programmers or venues or kind of artists as well to try and kind of make some money, but maybe it gives us an opportunity to try and, you know what, we have to change the formula a little bit. I don't know what the new formula will be, but hopefully...
Can you give us a hint, Ian? Because that's, I think, our work the coming months, no? That we allow ourselves to have messy practices.
Yeah. I think kind of, well, for my current situation, I've been on furlough now for 3 months. I'll go back to work tomorrow, not tomorrow, next week, finally, which I'm really excited about. But I have no doubt that our coming kind of years ahead are going to be so different, and it's going to be kind of just new ways of how do we actually still engage our audience, like engage our citizens, but actually get our artists to kind of come with us and actually to work with us collaboratively doing that.
So Ian, can I ask you in that sense?
Yeah.
You know, because we're in the last 5 minutes of this conversation. What kind of support would you like to have? And then not support in terms of let us take care of you, but support as a mature invitation, because, you know, if we want to change something, we have to do it together. So what kind of support would you like to have? Because there is there are a lot of people here. What do you have a
solution? No, I'm thinking within our own organisation, potentially looking more at the artist development side and kind of engagement side of our practice rather than the performance side of our practice. Obviously, that comes with a lot of, I suppose, financial kind of risks in terms of we were not going to necessarily get ticket sales or kind of income that way, but it also has potentially so many more rewards in terms of engagement and in terms of actually the value of the practice, really. So
different values than financial value. So to talk about values within the organization, what on earth are you supposed to do if you are an art institute, different than bringing in financial values and doing the job? Is that what you're saying? So discussion, what are the values we want to strive for?
Yeah, I think so. Kind of and that being more important than the bums on seats and the finance. But obviously, they both go hand in hand to some extent, so you just got to balance them out a little. Yeah, but I think there is potentially opportunity now to explore that, because if we can't open up to a full house, a full theatre, a full full kind of 336 people in the auditorium, what can we do differently?
This is what you experienced, no, Alida? That the COVID crisis, in a sense, accelerates that what you wanted to question when you came in, anyhow, no?
Yeah, a lot. It was full force right into reprogramming. So actually, COVID gave me the room and the space to question new culture, new way of programming, new working ethos together. So that's a lot in the same time, but I think it's good to take the momentum as we live in a world now where systems are breaking down, are being questioned. If you look at the COVID, but also at the Black Lives Matters movement. So we need to talk about implicit behavior and implicit power structures. So this is the moment to do it. It's scary sometimes because, as Peggy asked me, do you encounter gatekeepers? And not people are gatekeepers because it's behavior. It's not because they want to protect something and they feel that they are gatekeepers, but it's behavior. And at the moment you talk about behavior or you question behavior, you will find resistance. But I think we can no longer hide. We should go for it.
Any people who would like to add something to these words of Alida, and then perhaps, some, because this sounds encouraging. It is not. It is quite challenging also what you describe, but it gives me energy. So let's say it's always cool to leave each other with some energy. What would you like to add?
Just to add to that, just to reiterate, the systems weren't working for all, haven't done for a long time. The system didn't really work for me as an individual either. It wasn't sustainable for one person. So just to add to that, I actually embrace this time of change and embrace these conversations, and I'm quite excited about different ways of working. And maybe it's about going to the community instead of expecting them to come to us, and maybe things will be slightly more localized, and that's how the change will shift. There's quite a lot of power in a community. So I'd just like to leave with that.
Beautiful.
I also have one thing, Peggy. I think the structures and the systems and the power in the people in power positions often could be having problem with having this blind spot. So I think for us it's a moment to step to the front and to give possibilities, to present options, to present a different scope on reality. Because if a lot of us do that, we can help them in propelling this momentum, or else it's a wasted moment. So I think we should step to the front and give us some ideas. Be bold about it.
Thanks, Alida. In addition to what you said, Keira, working in several international projects, for sure, most of the international projects that were also granted in the last EU application, they are highly local. So it's about local practices. People don't want to travel anymore. It's breaking also presumptions in relation to success, that working internationally means that you are successful. And it's interesting to see that the local and the international now is more and more connected instead of the national and the international. So that for me, for sure, is something really powerful to witness. Yeah, what I love is that there are questions and parallel discussions happening in the chat during our conversations. Please, colleagues, continue doing that. You know, don't wait for the next encounter that is organized for you in order to have these conversations of these questions brought to your colleague, and vice versa. I know, having a practice of dialogue, that it is cool, that you grow like hell when you are in dialogue with a variety of people that challenge you and that allow you to be challenged. So that these words, I felt the need to add that. It's time to go. Ross, do you have some last things, or Zana, that you would like to say?
No, last thing for me is just thank you very much to you, Peggy, and thank you to all of the presenters. It's great that you could join us today, and thank you for everyone who participated and added questions. As I say, recording will go up, and yeah, that's all.
Thanks, Ross. Yes, thank you for this moment, and let's continue to do the work. Thank you. Stay safe. That's the word nowadays. Bye.